Captain Lee Minho floated in the command center of the stellar dawn, watching stars through the massive front window. The ship was huge, bigger than any building on Earth, but out here in the black space between galaxies, it felt tiny, like a small boat on an endless ocean. His crew had been traveling for 3 months, mapping empty space and finding nothing but rocks and gas clouds. Everything changed when Communications Officer Park Sora started screaming. Her screens lit up with colors that hurt to look at. Numbers and symbols flashed faster than human eyes could follow. The translation computer made sounds like breaking glass, trying to process signals it had never seen before. Sora pulled off her headset and threw it across the room, her face white with shock. "What is it?" Minho asked, running to her station. "Sir, these signals, they are not from any known species. The computer says some of these languages are older than human civilization by millions of years. They are coming from structures ahead of us, but sir, there should be nothing out here. We are in empty space." Minho looked at the main display. The navigation computer showed empty void for light years in every direction. They were exploring the space between major galaxy arms where no stars shone and no planets existed. It was supposed to be the loneliest place in the universe. But now energy readings filled their sensors like Christmas lights in the darkness. "Get me a visual," he ordered. The main screen flickered and showed something impossible. Massive structures floated in the void, each one bigger than Earth itself. They looked like buildings, but made of materials that glowed with their own light. Geometric shapes twisted in ways that made his eyes water just looking at them. Some were spinning slowly, others pulsed with rhythmic light like giant heartbeats. "How did we miss these on our approach scans?" Minho asked. "Sir, they were not there an hour ago," Engineer Kim Taiwan said from his station. "The energy readings suggest these structures just appeared, or maybe they were sleeping and now they are waking up." The ship shook gently as if something massive had brushed against it. Outside the window, one of the structures was moving. It unfolded like a flower made of metal and light, revealing hollow spaces inside big enough to hold entire cities. As it opened, more signals flooded their communication system. Dr. Nam Yuna, the ship doctor, came running onto the bridge. She had been monitoring the crew for radiation exposure, but now her medical scanner was beeping frantically. "Captain, something is happening to the crew. The scanner shows brain activity I have never seen before. Everyone on the ship is having the same unusual neural patterns. It is like something is trying to communicate directly with our minds." Minho felt it then, a pressure inside his head, like someone gently knocking on a door he did not know existed. Other crew members were holding their heads. Some looked frightened, others seemed curious. The pressure grew stronger, but not painful, more like the feeling of remembering something important. Sora gasped and pointed at her screens. "The signals are organizing themselves, sir. They are learning our language in real time. Look, the computer is starting to translate some of the messages." Words appeared on the screen, but they were not normal words. They seemed to carry meaning beyond their letters. When Minho read them, he understood not just what they said, but felt emotions and images flooding his mind. "Children of the third world, we have waited so long for you to reach the deep places between stars. You have traveled far from your small blue home to find us. We are the Primarchs, the first children of the universe itself. We have been sleeping, but your arrival has awakened us." More structures appeared around them, each one unique in design, but all radiating the same ancient intelligence. The ship was now surrounded by a city in space that had not existed minutes before. Lights danced between the structures like conversations happening at the speed of light. One structure, much larger than the others, began to approach the stellar dawn. It moved without engines or thrust, simply gliding through space as if the laws of physics were suggestions it could ignore. As it came closer, Minho could see that its surface was covered in symbols that shifted and changed like living writing. The pressure in his head intensified, and suddenly Minho was not just standing on his bridge anymore. He was floating in space without a suit, breathing somehow in the vacuum, face to face with something his mind could barely understand. The being before him was made of light and thought and cosmic energy. It had no fixed form, but somehow he knew it was looking at him with curiosity and something that felt like parental pride. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I am the architect," it said, "the first of the Primarchs to fully awaken. I have been watching your species for a very long time, little captain. You and your kind are special in ways you do not yet understand." Minho tried to speak, but found he could communicate with pure thought Why are you here? What do you want from us? The architect smiled. Though it had no mouth, we are here because you are here. We have been preparing this galaxy for your arrival for millions of years, waiting for you to develop the technology to reach us. Your species has qualities that make you unique among all. The children of the stars, what qualities? Minho asked. The architect gestured, and suddenly, Minho could see images of Earth throughout history. He saw humans facing impossible odds and refusing to give up. He saw them creating art and music and stories. Even in the darkest times, he saw them helping strangers and fighting for ideas they believed in, even when it cost them everything. You do not know when to quit, the architect said, with something like admiration. Other species, when faced with overwhelming challenges, become cautious. They retreat, they plan, they wait for better conditions. Your species sees impossible challenges and thinks this looks interesting. Minho watched as the images shifted to show other alien civilizations across the galaxy. Species with technology that could reshape matter itself, but who had become so careful and logical they had stopped taking risks. Species with telepathic abilities that let them share thoughts perfectly, but who had lost the ability to disagree and grow through conflict. We have tested thousands of species over millions of years, the architect continued. Each one found a different path to intelligence and power, but none had the complete combination of traits we need in our inheritors. Minho felt a chill that had nothing to do with the vacuum of space. The architect nodded slowly. We are ancient beyond your understanding, but we are not immortal. Our time is ending, and we must choose who will carry on our work, the work of guiding the galaxy, protecting the young species, helping them grow and evolve. The vision faded, and Minho found himself back on his bridge. His crew was staring at him with wide eyes. He had been gone for what felt like hours, but the ship chronometer showed only 30 seconds had passed. Sir, Sora whispered. Are you all right? You were standing there, but your eyes were glowing. Minho looked at his reflection in a dark screen. His eyes were returning to normal, but for a moment they had been filled with the same light that came from the ancient structures. He could feel the architect still there in his mind, not controlling but waiting. The communication system crackled to life with a voice that somehow spoke in every language on Earth simultaneously. People of the ship Stellar Dawn, you have been chosen to be the first to hear our message. We are the old gods, the Primarchs, the first intelligence in this galaxy. We have been waiting for your species to join us among the stars. Your journey to find us was no accident. We have been guiding you here, preparing you for this moment. You will be tested, as all species must be tested. But we believe you will succeed where others have failed. The galaxy is about to change. Captain Lee Minho, your species will either rise to become our successors or fall like so many others before you. The choice is yours, but know that we have great faith in the children of Earth. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Outside the window, the ancient structures pulsed with gentle light like sleeping giants waiting to see what humanity would do next. Minho knew that nothing would ever be the same again. His small ship, carrying barely 200 humans, had just made contact with beings older than continents, and somehow these cosmic gods had been waiting specifically for them. Commander Yun Ji-woo was eating breakfast when the alarms started screaming across the human colony ship New Seoul. The coffee cup flew from her hands as the ship shook violently. Red lights flashed everywhere, and the voice of Captain Hong Seung-min echoed through the corridors. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Unknown hostile forces are attacking civilian targets across the galaxy. Ju ran to the command center, still wearing her pajamas. The main screen showed chaos, alien ships burning in space planets under bombardment by massive machines that looked like they came from nightmares. The communication channels were filled with screams for help in dozens of languages. Sir, what is happening? She asked. The old gods have activated some kind of test, Hong said, his face grim. Ancient war machines are attacking every civilized world in the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire lost 3 entire fleets in the first hour. The Nexari are evacuating their home system. On the screen they watched a machine the size of a small moon tear through a fleet of advanced alien warships. The ship's weapons bounced off its hull like raindrops. The machine responded by firing beams of pure energy that turned the enemy vessels into glowing vapor. How are we supposed to fight something like that? Engineering Chief Cho Hyun-woo asked from his station. We do what humans always do, Jiwoo said. We figure it out as we go. The first test came within hours, a distress signal from the mining colony on Kepler. Station reached the new Sol. The message was brief and terrifying. Ancient machines had appeared in the system and were destroying everything that moved. The 3,000 miners and their families were trapped on the surface with no way to escape. Captain Hong wanted to wait for reinforcements from Earth, but Jiwoo knew that by the time help arrived, there would be nothing left to save. She convinced him to let her take a small rescue team in the cargo ship, Braveheart. It was barely armed and definitely not built for combat, but it was fast and the miners needed help. Now her team consisted of volunteers from different departments. Medical officer Dr. Nam Yuna insisted on coming to treat wounded civilians. Engineer Park Dong-yoon brought tools and explosives. Sergeant Kim Min-soo led a squad of security personnel who had never fought anything more dangerous than drunk miners. The journey to Kepler Station took 6 hours. During the trip they studied everything they could about the ancient machines. The creatures were enormous and heavily armed, but they seemed to follow predictable patterns. They attacked anything that looked like a threat, but ignored small civilian craft. Maybe we can use that, Park suggested. If we approach like we are just another mining ship, they might not notice us. When they reached Kepler Station, the sight made them all sick. The beautiful orbital platform was a twisted wreck of metal and flames. Ancient machines shaped like giant spiders crawled over the surface, tearing apart anything that moved. The mining ships that had tried to escape were floating debris fields. Dr. Nam counted the life signs on her scanner. 300 survivors huddled in the emergency shelters. The rest were gone. How do we get them out? Kim asked. The machines will see us the moment we land. We make noise somewhere else, Jiwoo decided. Park, can you rig an explosion on the far side of the station? Something big enough to get there? Attention, Park grinned. I can make the whole fuel depot go up like a supernova. The plan was simple and completely insane. Park would sneak onto the station, plant explosives in the fuel storage area, and set them off. The machines would investigate the explosion while Jiwoo and the others evacuated. The survivors, it required perfect timing and a lot of luck. Everything went wrong immediately. The explosives went off too early while Park was still escaping. The machines did not investigate the explosion. Instead, they seemed to get angry and started attacking everything in sight, including the emergency shelters where the survivors were hiding. Dr. Nam was treating wounded miners when the ceiling started collapsing. Kim and his security team were trying to hold off spider machines with weapons that barely scratched their armor. Jiwoo realized they were all going to die unless someone did something desperate. She grabbed the ship's communication system and started broadcasting on all frequencies. Hey, you big ugly spiders, she shouted. Can you understand me? You want to fight something? Try fighting me. The machines stopped attacking the shelters and turned toward her ship. Their glowing red sensors focused on the Braveheart like the eyes of predators. One of them started moving in her direction. Come on, Jiwoo muttered. Come and get me. What are you doing? Kim yelled over the radio. Buying you time. Get those people to the evacuation shuttles. The spider machine was fast, much faster than it looked. It scuttled across the station surface, heading straight for her ship. Its weapons were charging up, preparing to turn the Braveheart into scrap metal. At the last second, Jiwoo fired the ship's engines and dove toward the planet's surface. The machine followed her down through the atmosphere, both of them streaking through the sky like falling stars. The surface of Kepler 3 was mostly desert and rocky mountains. Jiwoo flew as low as she dared, weaving between canyon walls with the ancient machine right behind her. Its energy beams carved trenches in the rock around her ship. She led it on a chase across half the continent before her fuel started running low. The machine was still following, still shooting. The ship's hull was glowing from heat damage and several systems were failing. Then she saw it, a massive mining operation in the southern continent. Automated equipment was still running, digging a hole that went down for kilometers. The perfect trap if she could time it right. Jiwoo dove toward the mining site. The machine followed her down into the giant pit, its weapons firing continuously. The energy beams bounced off the metal walls, creating a light show that could be seen from orbit. At the bottom of the pit was the mining laser, a beam of focused energy that could cut through solid rock like butter. It was pointed up toward the surface, following a predetermined path. Jiwoo waited until the last possible second. Then she pulled up hard, pushing the ship's engines beyond their limits. The spider machine could not turn as quickly. It flew straight into the path of the mining laser. The ancient war machine died in a flash of light that turned the desert sand into glass. When Jiwoo limped back to the station, she found that her team had successfully evacuated all the survivors. The other spider machines had left when their companion was destroyed, apparently deciding that humans were too dangerous to ignore. But the real victory came later when they analyzed the destroyed machine park, found something incredible in the wreckage. The ancient technology was not just advanced, it was alive in some way. The machines had artificial intelligence that could learn and adapt. More importantly, they could be talked to. Within weeks, human teams across the galaxy were making contact with the ancient war machines. Instead of just fighting them, humans tried to communicate. The machines had been programmed to test civilizations, but they had been waiting so long they had started to think for themselves. Were lonely after millions of years of isolation. Others were curious about the young species they were supposed to test. A few were actually bored with their endless duties and wanted to try something new. The established galactic powers were horrified. The Zephyrian Empire had lost millions of soldiers trying to destroy the machines with brute force. The Nexari had retreated to heavily defended systems and waited for the attacks to end, but humans were having conversations with ancient weapons of mass destruction. The old gods watched from their cosmic realm as reports came in from across the galaxy. Human diplomats were negotiating ceasefires with war machines. Human engineers were helping repair damage to ancient systems that had been running for eons without maintenance. Human doctors were treating wounded aliens and ancient eyes with equal care. The architect spoke to its fellow primarchs through channels of pure thought. You see, it said, the other species try to defeat our tests through strength or cunning. The humans try to make friends with them. This is why we chose them. They see enemies and think potential allies. They see problems and think opportunities. The tests continued, but they were changing. The machines began working with humans instead of against them. Ancient knowledge was shared freely. Technology that could reshape matter itself was given to beings who had barely learned to travel between stars. Other species watched in amazement and growing fear as humanity formed alliances with forces they could not even understand. The galaxy was changing, and humans were at the center of it all. But some civilizations decided that humanity had become too dangerous to be allowed to continue. The Grand Alliance began forming, and secret military leaders from 17 different species met to discuss what they called the human problem. The old gods had chosen their inheritors, but the galaxy was not ready to accept that choice war was coming. The Archon Suyang was studying alien psychology when the universe exploded inside her mind. She had been working late in her laboratory aboard the research station, deep thought, trying to understand why the ancient machines responded so well to human contact. The other alien species had decades of experience with first contact protocols, but somehow humans were better at making friends with cosmic horror weapons. The vision hit her without warning. One moment she was reading data about Zephyrian military tactics. The next moment she was floating in a space that existed between dimensions, surrounded by beings of pure light and cosmic energy. Her human mind tried to process what she was seeing and nearly broke from the effort. You are the one called Suyang, a voice said from everywhere and nowhere. The sound was like stars singing. We are the Weaver. We have chosen you to receive the truth about our purpose. The being before her was different from the architect, where he had been solid and geometric. This one was fluid, like thoughts made visible. Its form shifted, constantly showing glimpses of every creature that had ever existed, every face that had ever looked up at the stars and wondered. I do not understand, Suyang managed to think. You will. The Weaver replied, come, let us show you the history of this galaxy. Suddenly, she was watching the birth of civilizations across millions of years. Species rose from primitive hunters to masters of space technology. The Eternal Dominion learned to manipulate time itself, but became obsessed with preventing any change. They froze their entire civilization in a single perfect moment and never grew again. The Harmony Collective developed telepathy so advanced they could share thoughts across light years, but they became paralyzed by understanding every possible viewpoint. They could see all sides of every argument and never make any decisions. The Void Shapers gained the power to reshape matter at the molecular level. They built perfect worlds with perfect beings, but removed all challenges from life. Their people became so comfortable they stopped trying to improve anything. Each species we guided, the Weaver explained. Each one we hoped would be worthy of inheriting our power, but they all failed the same way. They became too focused on their greatest strength and lost the balance needed for true wisdom. Suing watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on an ocean. Some lasted for millions of years, building empires that spanned entire galactic arms. Others burned bright and died young, leaving behind only ruins and legends. What made them all fail, she asked. They stopped growing, the Weaver said. When faced with ultimate challenges, they either became too careful or too reckless. They forgot how to be both wise and brave, both logical and emotional, both individual and unified. The vision shifted to show Earth throughout its history, humans facing ice ages and plagues and wars, but never giving up. Instead, they adapted, they learned, they became stronger through suffering and kinder through loss. Your species has something we have never seen before, the Weaver continued. You have the ability to hold contradictions in balance. You can be warriors and healers, scientists and artists, individuals and communities all at the same time. But why do you need inheritors at all? Suyang asked. Why not continue ruling the galaxy yourselves? The Weaver grew sad and its light dimmed. We are dying, child, not in the way mortals die, but fading into pure abstraction. Our power comes from existing partially outside reality itself. But the more powerful we become, the less connected we are to the physical universe. She could see it now. The old gods were becoming too cosmic, too removed from the experiences of mortal beings. They could reshape entire star systems with a thought, but they were losing the ability to understand why a single flower was beautiful. We need successors who can bridge the gap between cosmic awareness and mortal experience, the Weaver explained. Beings who can wield ultimate power without losing touch with what makes life worth living. The vision changed again, showing her the real scope of the old gods' plan. The tests were not just about finding worthy inheritors, they were about preparing the entire galaxy for a transition to a new form of civilization. But Lieutenant Bei Do-yun, who had been monitoring her vital signs, suddenly appeared in the vision. His presence was like a splash of cold water, bringing her back to physical reality. Doctor, are you all right? He asked. His voice echoed strangely in the cosmic space. The Weaver turned its attention to the young officer with interest, another one who asks the unexpected questions. It said, why do you think we should continue ruling? Lieutenant Doan looked around at the impossible space they were in, his face showing amazement and terror in equal measure. Because you are better at it than we could ever be, he said honestly. You have existed for millions of years. You have wisdom we cannot imagine. But we have forgotten how to dream, the Weaver replied. We have forgotten how to hope for things that do not yet exist. We have forgotten how to love imperfect beings we see the mathematics of existence, but we no longer feel its joy. The revelation hit both humans like a physical blow. The old gods were not just looking for servants or successors, they were looking for salvation. They needed beings who could carry on their work while maintaining the emotional connections that gave that work meaning. The vision began to fade, but not before the Weaver showed them one final truth. The galaxy was not just home to thousands of civilizations, it was under threat from something beyond their reality, entities of pure entropy that consumed entire universes. The old gods had been preparing for this invasion for eons. Your species will face the ultimate test, the Weaver warned. Things that exist only to destroy, things that cannot be reasoned with or converted or befriended. You will need every quality that makes you human to survive. What is coming? Zhuang found herself back in her laboratory. Do-yun was shaking her shoulder, trying to wake her up. The vision had lasted subjective hours, but only minutes had passed in real time. What did you see? He asked. The truth, she whispered. They are not just giving us power, they are giving us responsibility for the entire universe. News of the revelation spread quickly through human space. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just being tested for worthiness, they were being prepared to become the guardians of reality itself. The response from other galactic civilizations was immediate and terrifying. Zephyrian Empire declared that no primitive species should be given cosmic power. The Nexari accused the old gods of favoritism, claiming that any species could seem worthy if given enough help. Their crystalline hegemony announced that they would not accept human authority under any circumstances within. Days 17 different civilizations had signed the Treaty of Absolute Opposition. They called themselves the Grand Alliance, and their stated goal was simple: prevent humanity from ascending to cosmic power by any means necessary. Admiral Park Jin-ho received the first intelligence reports about Alliance fleet movements while he was inspecting humanity. Newest warship, the destroyer Indomitable. It was barely 300 meters long. Compared to Alliance dreadnoughts that measured in kilometers, Sir Lieutenant Commander Shin Yunji reported, the Alliance is mobilizing everything they have. 2,000 ships are already moving toward human space. How many ships do we have total? Park asked. 47, sir, and most of those are converted cargo vessels. The mathematical reality was crushing. The Alliance had more ships than humanity had people. Their technology was centuries more advanced. Their experience in space warfare spanned millennia. But Park smiled anyway. Then we will have to be very creative, he said. The war for humanity future was about to begin, and the odds were impossible, but humans had never let impossible odds stop them before. The old gods had chosen well. Their inheritors did not know how to surrender. Across the galaxy, ancient machines began to stir again, but this time they were not testing humanity. They were choosing sides, and to everyone's surprise, many of them chose to stand with the young species that had treated them like friends instead of weapons. The balance of power was shifting, and no one knew how it would end. Admiral Park Jin-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching 2,000 enemy ships approach through hyperspace. His entire fleet consisted of 47 vessels, most of them converted cargo haulers with welded-on weapons. The enemy had battleships that could crack planets. The smart thing to do would be to surrender. Instead, he opened a channel to all human ships and said, "Today we show the galaxy what impossible looks like." The Grand Alliance had expected this to be a quick war. Primitive humans with inferior technology could not possibly stand against the combined might of 17 advanced civilizations. Their battle plan was simple: destroy human military forces, capture Earth, and present the old gods with a fait accompli. What they had not counted on was human creativity. First battle took place near the mining colony of Nubizan. Zephyrian Admiral Vexstar led a force of 300 heavy cruisers against 8 human ships. The humans should have been vaporized in the first exchange of fire. Instead, they did something no military academy in the galaxy taught. Captain Seo Jisoo of the corvette Dancing Bear flew her ship directly at the Zephyrian flagship. Then she broadcast a message on all frequencies. Attention, Zephyrian Fleet, this is Captain SEO of the Earth Defense Forces. Before we start shooting each other, I wanted to ask you something. Why are you here? The question was so unexpected that Admiral Vexstar actually answered, because humans are a threat to galactic stability. How are we a threat? SEO asked, while her ship continued its apparent suicide run toward his much larger vessel. We have 47 ships total. You have 300 just in this battle group. We cannot even threaten one star system, let alone the galaxy. The Zephyrian Admiral paused. The human ship was now close enough that his point defense systems should have destroyed it, but something made him hesitate. You have been chosen by the old gods, Vexstar replied. That makes you dangerous. Why? SEO asked. Because we might use cosmic power badly, but you are here ready to commit genocide to prevent us from getting that power. How is that better? The question hung in space like an accusation. Other human ships were broadcasting similar messages to different parts of the Alliance fleet. Personal conversations between individual captains asking honest questions about why they were fighting. Engineer Ko Sungjae had spent weeks learning Zephyrian language and culture. He spoke directly to the enemy crews about their families, their hopes, their fears. Instead of propaganda, he shared stories about human children who dreamed of visiting alien worlds. The psychological effect was devastating. Alliance crews had been told they were fighting primitive monsters. Instead, they found themselves talking to people who seemed genuinely curious about their lives. The battle that should have lasted minutes stretched into hours as more and more Alliance ships stopped firing to listen to human broadcasts. By the end of the day, 12 Zephyrian captains had defected to the human side. Admiral Vexstar returned to Alliance headquarters in defeat, not because he had been outfought, but because he could no longer justify the war to his own crew. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Humans seemed to have an unlimited ability to find common ground with their enemies. They rescued Alliance survivors from destroyed ships. They provided medical aid to wounded enemies they treated prisoners of war better than most species treated their own citizen. Sergeant Major Imnari became famous throughout the galaxy when her unit saved a Nexari research station from Alliance bombing. The grateful Nexari scientists were amazed that humans had risked their lives for strangers. The footage of human soldiers sharing their food with alien refugees spread across every communication network. The old gods watched with growing approval as humans consistently chose the difficult path of compassion over the easy path of hatred. Even when Alliance forces attacked civilian targets, killing millions of innocent people, humanity responded with rescue missions and medical aid rather than revenge strikes. But the war was far from over. The Alliance leadership recognized that conventional military tactics would not work against humans. Instead, they began targeting human psychology. The attack on Earth came without warning. A massive Alliance fleet emerged from hyperspace around humanity home system. The planet defenses were overwhelmed in minutes. Orbital bombardment rained down on every major city. Billions died in the first few hours. Captain Song Myre led the desperate defense of Seoul, flying her fighter through flak so thick it looked like a metal storm. Her squadron shot down dozens of Alliance bombers, but there were always more. The city burned around them as they fought. When her fighter was finally hit and crashed into the ruins of the university where she had studied literature. Her last transmission was a song her voice carried across the communication networks as she sang an old folk tune about flowers blooming in spring. The song became a battle cry. Humans across the galaxy heard it, and something fundamental changed. In their response to the war, they had tried diplomacy, they had tried compassion, they had tried understanding, now they tried fury. The counterattack came from an unexpected source. The ancient machines that humans had befriended during the tests suddenly activated across Alliance space. War constructs that had been dormant for millions of years began attacking Alliance fleets with devastating efficiency. The machine called Memory Keeper had formed a friendship with engineer Park Dong-yoon during the testing phase. When it learned that Alliance forces had killed Dong-yoon family on Earth, it did something unprecedented for an artificial intelligence. It chose revenge. The Alliance found themselves fighting on two fronts, against human forces that no longer held back and against ancient weapons that had decided to take sides in a mortal conflict. More importantly, humans began displaying abilities that should have been impossible. Lieutenant Kim Jae-in survived the destruction of his ship in deep space. He should have died when his life support failed. Instead, he somehow stayed alive for 3 days in vacuum. Until rescue arrived, medical scans showed that his body had temporarily adapted to survive in conditions that would kill any known life form. Dr. Lee Hana discovered that she could understand any alien language after a few minutes of exposure, even languages that had never been encountered before. Her brain seemed to be developing translation abilities that worked on pure intuition. Combat engineer Yu Sung-ho found that he could repair any technology, no matter how alien or advanced, simply by touching it and thinking about how it should work. His hands would move without conscious direction, making adjustments that should have required years of study. The old gods were not surprised. The process of choosing inheritors had begun to change humanity at a fundamental level. They were becoming something more than human, while remaining essentially themselves. The tide of war began to turn, not through superior firepower, but through the same qualities that had impressed the Primarchs in the first place. Humans made allies where others made enemies. They found solutions where others saw only problems. They refused to give up hope, even when hope seemed foolish. Colonel Oh Sang-woo had lost his entire family when Alliance forces bombed Seoul. He had every reason to hate his enemies, but when his unit captured an Alliance commander who was wounded and dying, he ordered his medics to save the alien life. Why? An Alliance prisoner asked. Why help me after what we did to your world? Because Sang-woo replied, that is who we are. The Alliance began to fracture. Species that had joined out of fear started to question whether humans were really the threat they had been told about. The crystalline hegemony withdrew from the war after human relief workers helped evacuate their colonies from natural disasters. The Void Shapers defected entirely when humans shared advanced medical technology freely with former enemies. By the end of the first year of war, the Grand Alliance had shrunk from 17 species to 7. The humans had gained 12 new allies, and the ancient machines were actively supporting human operations, but the core alliance members, the Zephyrian Empire, the Nexari, Confederacy, and the Eternal Dominion, were not ready to surrender. They had invested too much in victory to accept defeat. The war entered its final phase as alliance forces prepared for one last desperate gambit. If they could not defeat humanity through conventional warfare, they would try to break human spirit through an act of unthinkable cruelty. They were going to destroy every human colony world simultaneously, leaving only Earth alive as a warning to the galaxy about what happened to species who challenged the established order. The old gods could have intervened. They could have destroyed every alliance ship with a thought, but they held back, waiting to see how their chosen inheritors would respond to the ultimate test. Humanity was about to face the darkest moment in their history, but they would not face it alone. The friends they had made, the enemies they had converted, and the ancient intelligences they had befriended were all preparing to stand with them. The final battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. President Yu Minjung stood in the ruins of what had been the most beautiful city on Earth. The Alliance bombardment had turned Seoul into a crater filled with twisted metal and broken dreams. 5 billion people had died in the attack, including her own daughter. The old gods had offered her the power to end this war with a single thought. She could have erased every Alliance world from existence, turning their entire civilizations into cosmic dust. The temptation was overwhelming, especially when she looked at the memorial walls covered with names of the dead, but she had not taken that power yet. Colonel O. Sang-woo knelt beside a grave marker that bore his wife's name and his children's names. The Alliance had targeted civilian shelters specifically to maximize casualties. His family had been in the safest place on the planet when the bombs fell. The architect stood beside him, visible only to him, its cosmic presence offering comfort and terrible power. You could have prevented this, it said quietly. Your species has suffered enough. Let us give you the ability to ensure this never happens again. How? Sang-woo asked, his voice broken with grief. Accept our full power, the architect replied. Become what we are, cosmic entities beyond physical limitation. You could protect every human world simultaneously. You could reach across the galaxy and stop any threat before it begins. The offer was real. Sang-woo could feel the power waiting just beyond his reach, the ability to reshape reality itself, to become a god capable of protecting everyone he cared about. But something held him back. What would I become? He asked. Something greater than human, the architect said, but also something less. The power changes you would gain cosmic awareness, but lose the ability to understand why individual lives matter. You would save humanity, but no longer be able to love humans. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. The old gods were offering their power to every human who had suffered loss, every parent who had lost children, every soldier who had watched friends die, every citizen who had seen their world burned. Lihana worked in the refugee camps, treating survivors of the Earth bombardment. She had the medical knowledge to save lives, but not enough supplies or time. The dying outnumbered the living, and every choice meant someone else would not survive. The Weaver appeared to her as she held a child who was fading away. Despite her best efforts, you could save them all, it offered. Take our power and heal every wound, reverse every death, undo all the suffering. At what cost? She asked without looking up from the dying child. Your humanity, the Weaver replied honestly. You would become capable of healing entire worlds, but you would no longer understand why one child matters more than cosmic balance. The child died in her arms. Despite everything she could do, Hana wept for the 100th time that day, but still she did not accept the power across the galaxy. Humans were making similar choices. They were offered godhood and were turning it down, not because they did not want the power, but because they understood what they would lose. The Alliance leadership watched these refusals with growing confusion. Their own species would have accepted cosmic power immediately. Why were humans hesitating when offered the ultimate praise? The answer came from an unexpected source. Private First Class and Yuzhen had survived the defense of Bezan by hiding in the subway tunnels while the city burned above her. She was 19 years old and had lost everyone she had ever known in the war. When the global memorial service was held for Earth Fallen, she was chosen to speak for her generation. The speech was broadcast across the galaxy, translated into every known language. Alliance forces listened to it from their ships. Human allies heard it in refugee camps. Even the ancient machines paused their activities to process her words. "They killed our families," she said, standing in the ruins of the city where she had grown up. "They destroyed our homes. They tried to break our spirit. They wanted us to become like them, full of hate and fear and the need for revenge." Her voice was quiet, but somehow it carried to every corner of human space. "But they did not kill who we are," she continued. "If we become killers too, then they win. The people who died, they died believing we were better than that. We have to be better than that." The speech lasted only 5 minutes. But it changed everything. Humans across the galaxy heard a teenager speaking truth that their leaders had forgotten. The war was not about winning or losing, it was about remaining human while gaining the power of gods the old gods watched with. Something resembling pride, as humanity made the hardest choice possible. They chose to remain mortal. They chose to accept limitation. They chose to be human even when offered divinity, but that choice came with consequences. The Alliance launched their final attack while humanity was still grieving. Every human colony world was targeted simultaneously. The plan was to leave Earth alive but isolated, to serve as a warning about challenging the galactic order. The attack should have succeeded. Human defenses were devastated by the previous bombardments. Most of the fleet was destroyed or scattered. There was no rational way to defend dozens of worlds with the few ships that remained. Humanity won anyway. They won because the friends they had made, the enemies they had converted, and the ancient intelligences they had befriended all chose to stand with them. The war became a galactic civil war as species that had remained neutral picked sides. The crystalline hegemony sent their entire fleet to defend human colonies. The Harmony Collective used their telepathic abilities to coordinate human and alien forces across vast distances. Ancient machines that had not fought for millions of years activated to protect the species that had treated them as friends rather than weapons. But the real victory came from something unexpected. Captain Shin Unji was commanding the defense of New Tokyo. When she realized that the Alliance attack was not going according to plan, enemy ships were hesitating, firing warning shots instead of kill shots. Some were not firing at all. She opened the communication channel to the Alliance fleet. "This is Captain Shin of the Earth Defense Forces," she transmitted. "Why are you hesitating?" The response came from Admiral Vexstar, the same Zephyrian officer who had defected during the first battle. "Because we have been watching you," he said. "We have seen how you treat prisoners, how you help civilians, how you choose mercy over revenge. Even now, when you have every reason to hate us, you are still trying to understand us." The Alliance fleet was fracturing in real time as individual captains made personal choices about which side of history they wanted to be on. The war that was supposed to end with human extinction instead ended with the collapse of the Grand Alliance itself. In the aftermath, humanity found themselves in a position they had never expected. They had won a war against impossible odds, but the cost had been devastating. Earth was scarred. Billions were dead. The survivors were traumatized and grieving. The old gods made their final offer. "We can undo it all," the architect said to President Yu as she stood in the ruins of Seoul. "We can reverse time, restore the dead, rebuild the worlds. All you have to do is accept our power and become our successors." This time the offer was different. The Primarchs had learned from humanity's choices. They were not asking humans to lose their humanity. They were asking them to find a way to keep it while wielding cosmic power. "The galaxy is still in danger," the Weaver explained. "The entropy beings we mentioned are coming. They consume entire realities. You cannot face them as you are now. You need power that transcends physical law, but you also need to remain human," the architect added. "That is the balance we could never achieve. That is why we chose you." Humanity faced their final choice: accept godhood and the responsibility for protecting all existence, or remain mortal and watch the galaxy burn. The decision would reshape the universe itself. The transformation began at dawn on the anniversary of the Soul bombardment. Commander Choi Young-ho was the first to volunteer for full ascension to cosmic awareness. He stood in the ruins of his childhood home holding a photograph of his parents, and made the choice that would change him forever. The process was unlike anything the old gods had attempted before. Instead of simply transferring power, they merged their consciousness with human awareness, creating something entirely new. Young-ho felt his mind expand to encompass entire star systems, but somehow he remained himself. His first act as a new god was to create a memorial garden in space, a place where every being who had died in the war, human and alien alike, would be remembered. The garden spanned light years and contained flowers that sang with the voices of the fallen. I can reshape matter itself, he marveled to Dr. Lee. Hana, who had chosen to remain mortal, I can move stars and create life, but I still remember the taste of my mother cooking. I still feel sad when I think about friends who died. I am cosmic, but I'm still human. That balance was what made humanity unique as inheritors of divine power. Other species had been offered godhood throughout galactic history, but they had always lost their essential nature in the transformation. They became cold, efficient cosmic entities focused only on maintaining universal order. Humans became cosmic gardeners. Captain Shin Yunji chose a different path. She accepted limited enhancement that made her an ideal bridge between mortal and divine consciousness. She could communicate with the new gods while remaining connected to physical reality. Her first assignment was leading the new Galactic Council, where former enemies worked together to rebuild civilizations shattered by war. The council meetings were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of the rigid hierarchies and territorial disputes that had defined interstellar politics for millions of years, there were actual conversations. Species that had fought for centuries found common ground through human mediation. We see possibilities where others see only problems, Shin explained to the Zephyrian delegate who was struggling to accept human leadership. Your people are master strategists, but you think only in terms of winning and losing. We think in terms of growing and learning. The transformation was not without challenges. Some humans who accepted cosmic power struggled with the temptation to impose their will on the galaxy. The ability to reshape reality made it easy to think in terms of forcing solutions rather than finding them. Admiral Park Junho became one of the Watchers tasked with monitoring newly ascended humans for signs of corruption. The job required him to be ready to stop former friends if they began to lose their humanity. The test came when Commander Kim Taiwan, who had gained power over time itself, decided to prevent the war by changing history. He could have saved billions of lives by stopping the Alliance attack before it began. Park confronted him in a space between seconds where time stood still. You cannot save them by erasing their choices, he said. The people who died, they chose to die fighting for something they believed in. If you take away their sacrifice, you take away their meaning. But I could save everyone, Kim protested. I could make it so the war never happened, and you would become exactly what the old gods were afraid of, Park replied. A being so focused on perfect outcomes that you forget why individual choices matter. Kim stepped back from the brink. He let history remain unchanged, but used his power to ensure that the lessons of the war would never be forgotten. The real test of humanity's new role came when the Void Seekers arrived. They came from outside the galaxy, entities of pure entropy that existed only to consume reality itself. They had already devoured 3 neighboring galaxies, and Earth was directly in their path. The